Good afternoon, and thank you all for joining us today at Allegiant Stadium. On behalf of all of us at the Raiders in the city of Las Vegas, I want to welcome you all to the home of Raider Nation. My name is Sandra Douglas Morgan, and I'm the president of the Las Vegas Raiders. This stadium has welcomed hundreds of thousands of fans, sports and fitness fanatics over the past few years, and it's already seen over 1 million people attend events just here in the last 6 months, with more than hundreds and thousands of people traveling all over the world just for stadium events, such as today's programming. It's an honor to have the team here from Abbott with us today. For over 130 years, your company has enabled billions of people to understand their health and wellness while living their best lives. And I'm looking forward to what I know will be a tremendous program. Today's session will cover a topic that is incredibly important to not only me, but to our organization as a whole. As a leader here, it is our top priority to pursue investments that will help us fulfill our commitment to excellence, both on and off the field, and the advancements that medical technology that can help our players and athletes in our community, which are some of the most important investments that any sports franchise or community can make. As you'll hear, the rapidly developing field of sports information technology enables performance that has previously been unattainable, creating exciting sports moments and enabling players to maximize their training and focus on the most important resource we all have, our health. And with that, I'll turn the mic over to Pam Bede, who will introduce today's panelists and lead the conversation. Again, it's such a pleasure to have you all here at Allegiant Stadium. I hope to see you all back for a concert or hopefully a Raiders home game. Thank you.
Thank you. So nice. Thank you, Sandra. Thank you for introducing this panel. So we're here today to talk about the future of sports health technology. I'm Pam Bede. I am a sports dietitian, an author, a 27-time marathoner, and I'm beyond excited to lead this panel today. So we're going to talk a lot about how technology and health and sports are all very closely linked and intertwined, and how we can use new technologies, new devices to help our athletes push their performance forward, but also protect our athletes and improve health and help them achieve really life to the fullest. So over the past few years, we've seen the introduction of new technologies in sports like biowearables and rapid blood tests and the advent of new apparel and gear that athletes can use. So we've got a great panel today to talk through how we're using those technologies to improve health, to improve performance, world record breaking times in the marathon, improvements in triathlon, improvements across brain health, reducing injury, improving diagnostics. So we're gonna go ahead and get started. We're going to break this panel up into 4 quarters because we are in the fabulous Allegiant Football Stadium. We're going to talk about where we're at as an industry currently, how we're promoting performance, how we're protecting our athletes, and then where do we go from here? What is our best bet of different technologies we need to bring to life, and what we have on kind of our wish list as athletes and healthcare practitioners. So I'm going to introduce our panel. To my left is Dr. Chris Devolantes, who is the Senior Director of Global Medical Affairs at Abbott's Point of Care business. He is a board certified by the American Board of Emergency Medicine. He's the guy that you want in your cell phone contacts the next time you have a bump or a bruise. He's practiced emergency medicine for over 26 years. He's a fellow of the American College of Emergency Physicians, and he's also a 27-time marathoner and a very speedy guy. Next, we have Skye Monk, a professional triathlete, multi-time Ironman and 70.3 champion, including the reigning Ironman North American champion, the 2019 Ironman European champion. She is currently ranked 11th in the Professional Triathletes Organization World Rankings. And my very scientific Google searching has taught me that she is faster than most any of us in this room. So in case you're wondering, she is. Next, we've got Kevin Pierce. He is a former professional snowboarding champion who suffered a career-ending traumatic brain injury while training for the Olympics in 2009. And he's recovered from his injury, and then he co-founded a charity foundation called the Love Your Brain Foundation that seeks to help anyone who's suffered a TBI through yoga and through meditation. Finally, we've got Chris Troyanos. He's got an extensive record of providing medical leadership and logistical support at a range of athletic events with a range of athletes and organizations. He is lucky enough to have led for 45 years the Boston Marathon, one of my very favorite races in the whole world. 26 of those as the event's medical coordinator, where he leads a committee of over 60 medical professionals and wrangles 1,800 on-site medical volunteers. All right, so we are going to have our 4 quarters. We're going to have an amazing halftime show, often also led by someone who is faster than any of us, in case you're wondering. And then afterwards, we'll go to an overtime, which will have an opportunity for a networking event. You can grab some snacks and some beverages, and then we'll go from there. So getting started with our first quarter, the state of sports health technology industry. And Chris, no pressure, but my first question is for you. You know, you spend your weekends in the ER. You're currently an ER doctor. You're working with patients who come in, athletes who come in. When you're not doing that, you're training for your next event, I'm sure. So tell us why you're passionate about health technology and the different technologies we're bringing forward for athletes and active individuals.
Okay. Yeah, I'm passionate about it. I'm very excited about it too. You know, technology has come a long way. Many of you may recall our chairman and CEO, Robert Ford, who addressed the Consumer Electronics Show last year, and he talked about the convergence of technology and health and empowering lives and human-powered health. And it really resonated with me, and that was even before I came on board with Abbott. It's really important to recognize how far we've come along. And as an ER physician for over 26 years, I've recognized that every patient's different. Every patient comes in with different risk factors, different genetic predispositions to illness, different symptoms. They describe their symptoms differently. Every patient I see is different, and I need diagnostic testing to kind of figure out what's going on. And when you translate that to sports, every athlete's different. Everybody's body's different. And you know, their goals are different. My goals have been, you know, for years, I just started running 12 years ago. My goal was to qualify for the Boston Marathon, which I've done finally. Sky's goals are much different. She's actually out there to win the marathon or win the triathlon. But everybody has different goals, and everybody's body responds differently. So what's really cool about the technology now is that our bodies are trying to send us signals to tell us how we're responding to exercise and to sports. And the technology that's out there now, such as biowearables, is basically decoding some of the messages our bodies are telling us and letting it translate it into a language we can understand and giving us data that's actually very personal and very precise for that individual. And it could be a novice, like the person running their first 5K, or somebody like me trying to run a marathon, or somebody like you trying to win an Ironman. But that data is very important. It gives us data about how our body is responding, how much fuel we have left. You wouldn't drive a race car without a fuel gauge to know when you run out of fuel. You wouldn't you need a speedometer to tell you how fast you're going. You need to have that. So we have the ability now to measure glucose and lactate and ketones so that we can take that data and customize it so we can alter our diet and our rest and our recovery and our training and how hard we're working, so that we can optimize our bodies and optimize our performance. And in the ER, it's the same way. We have handheld diagnostic technology that allows us within minutes to get an idea what's going on with a patient. In the medical tents, we have technology that allows them to do tests on athletes and on runners that succumb to weather and other things like dehydration and heat stroke. And we can test electrolytes and other things that are really important so we can render the right treatment in a timely fashion for that athlete. And so we'll get more into that maybe later, where Chris can explain his experience in the Boston Marathon and other large events. So I think it's really exciting where we're going, and also with concussion, which we'll talk about maybe. We have a biomarker for the brain now, which we haven't had in the past, where we can actually detect whether there's been a significant head injury and help determine how we work that up. Do we do imaging? Do they need follow-up? How bad is their head injury? So a lot's on the horizon.
I love it. It's data, it's cutting edge science, it's innovation, it's combining it all to give it, empowering the athlete. right? It's kind of like what you were saying. Our bodies are always talking to us. How do we give people the data so they can understand it and respond and kind of own their own health? So that's awesome. Sky, when you think through technology, you've been pro for about 5 years, right? And when I think of the evolution of technology in endurance sports, initially like GPS, like this large, and you carry it on a fanny pack. But thinking through like the last 5 years, and you think through technology and where you were when you went pro initially to where you are now, how is technology changing? How are you using that to keep your performance moving forward?
Yeah, good question. So as a professional triathlete who focuses on Ironman, I guess I'll cover quickly what Ironman is. Ironman is a triathlon, swim, bike, run, 2.4-mile swim, a 112-mile bike, and then a 26.2-mile run, which, yes, that is a marathon at the end of all of that. And for someone like me, that takes between about 8.5 to 9 hours to complete. So I do a lot of training in order to be competitive at that level, about 25 to 35 hours a week to be fit. And so I'm training about 3 times a day, and every single session I'm using technology and collecting data about my output and what I'm doing. So I've really learned in these 5 years as a professional how to use that technology, because what I find it does for me and how it helps me perform at the highest level, it gathers all of my information, while I'm training, while I'm swimming, whether that's my heart rate or my power output on the bike, or I'm wearing Abbott's LibraSense glucose monitor to monitor my blood sugar levels. It's gathering all that information and giving me that feedback, but it also helps guide me as an athlete because I can see the real-time data. And that's one thing that I think technology has really improved in the last several years, is the ability to get that real-time feedback. You mentioned the GPS watch that has come a long way, and it's probably much more accurate now, and so much easier to wear and charge and all these things. So yeah, guiding me and just gathering the information so that I can analyze, how I performed, how I felt. There's days where, as an athlete, sometimes you don't feel good, but your output is still okay. So it's kind of nice to have the technology saying, okay, well, my legs feel terrible right now, but I'm actually doing all right. Or sometimes you need it to push you a little harder. You maybe don't feel great, but you know what you're capable of because you've been using the technology and you have the data from hours and hours of training. And those are very important tools for me as an athlete.
And that makes sense. As a healthcare practitioner, I love it when an athlete comes to me with more data.
Yeah.
And one of the really helpful things that data can also show us is, like what you said, what is working, right? So, it's like the data has, let's say blood glucose, and the glucose is at a level where we want it to be, but the performance isn't there yet. But then we can kind of discount that, like, okay, your fuel is great.
Yeah.
Can we talk about sleep or hydration, whatever? So it definitely kind of decodes what's going on behind the scenes. So, Chris, when you think through, the health technology industry, when you think through the technology we have, how are you on the sidelines or on the race course using technology to help athletes understand what's going on behind the scenes?
Sure. Well, first off, I want to thank Abbott and all of you for being here today. It's just a great opportunity to be with this great panel. There's no doubt that technology has made leaps and bounds through a number of different sports sectors, but when it comes to running and the running sector, yes, there have been increases and improvements, particularly with clothing, shoes, wearable technology with those smartwatches and all of that, but I think in the running industry, it's been a little bit lacking and probably could improve over time. But when you look at my event, particularly the Boston Marathon, and what we do from the medical standpoint, we don't really pay much attention to that technology. Our technology is based on how are we going to respond to what could be a very busy day. So to give you a little bit of a context, it was mentioned that we have 1,800 medical volunteers. I have 30,000 runners participating in obviously a 26.2-mile event that goes from west to east, and the different challenges that creates. Now, in addition to that, we also have to coordinate with participating hospitals, public safety agents, state and federal, for a number of different reasons. So all of our technology and technology approaches have been really in a couple of different sectors. One, communications, so that in the interaction between all of those agencies, if something goes bad, we can respond very quickly. And again, when you're trying to cover a sporting event that's 26.2 plus miles, that is extremely difficult to do. So if someone has a cardiac arrest or something like that, you have a limited amount of time, as you know, to be able to respond. And our systems allow that to happen. The other thing that we're also very in tune with is situational awareness. So that one of the major goals in whether it be the Boston Marathon or any event that I manage medically is we don't want to be, and I may say we, the event, we do not want to be a burden on the public safety. So if something was done here in Vegas, we don't want your parents, your grandparents, or you to have any issues with getting to the appropriate medical care at any ED or hospital. So we have to make sure that we're doing the best we can to really take care of our runners in the facilities that we create. So realistically, we don't call our medical tents first aid. They're all medical. And we do high-level medical care in 26 stations on the course and 3 or 4 in Boston. And not uncommon, particularly Boston, because I'll say this unabashedly, is that Boston is probably one of the hardest marathons in the world to run because of the topographical nature and the weather changes from west to east. So for us medically, it's not uncommon for us to see on the low end 2 to 3% of the field size, or as high as 9 or 10% of the field size. And I'll get into a couple of years that we did reach those numbers. That's a lot of medical encounters over an 8 or 9 hour period. So we have to be prepared for all of that, and that's how we use technology to our advantage. And there are obviously some other medical technologies we'll use that I can talk about later.
But one question I have is, you've been running the medical organization at Boston for a very long time. I'm curious what that looked like, 20 years ago, and what does that tent look like today? I hope I never have to stop in, by the way. But what does that look like?
Well, one, I can promise you're going to get great care.
I appreciate that.
That's a must. It's changed so much. I mean, again, the ability and the coordination that we had, and again, I'll go back to, again, you're all aware of what happened in 2013 with the bombing. The level of coordination we had was high prior to the bombing, but obviously that really ramped things up. But what we're able to do is that we have to understand that 1,800 people can't deal with it on their own. So that we have to make sure that we're partnering with our EMS, our hospitals, Department of Public Health. I mean, there's so many agencies that make what we do in Boston work. So that's been going on for a long time. Now, granted, it wasn't that way 20 years ago.
Right.
But we've grown, we've learned, we've made mistakes. I'll be very clear about that. And when we make mistakes, we don't repeat them.
But what you're describing is, I think, something that we're all aspiring towards is this ecosystem, right? Mm-hmm. You explained it, things that I never think about, how you coordinate with healthcare professionals, coaches, hospitals before the event, right? So something to think through as we think through technology is how do we do that? How do we build a better ecosystem of trainers, coaches, athletes, organizations, and businesses so that we can support athletes, in their performance and their health?
If I could add to that, one of the things that we're still working on, and we've been good, as far as Boston goes, technology, we're progressive in what we do. But we know that, especially in the endurance medicine industry, endurance sports in general, we as a whole need to do more in preventive medicine. Mm-hmm. There's just not enough there right now. So how we're educating our runners, how we're educating the volunteers that are not medical, including the medical folks, how we educate the hospitals and the public safety folks, because our protocols are different from what you might be seeing in an ED or in an ambulance. Yeah. So that education piece is absolutely vital.
I think it's the education then, for me, the technology allows us to personalize it, right? Yes. Like you were saying, everyone's needs are different. When we have a biosensor and we can say, this is exactly what my body is telling me, hopefully we'll get to a place where we're, providing that for all athletes. So, fantastic discussion on where we're at right now as far as the state of the industry goes. Now, I'd love to chat more on my favorite topic, which is pushing performance further, achieving our peak performance. So Skye, this first question is going to be for you. Setting the stage, this is my favorite topic. But when we think through technology that has helped you push your performance forward, where's your first go-to right now? What are you utilizing?
Well, there is a lot to choose from right now, especially in triathlon. There's been so many new advancements, and not even new advancements, but just more athletes using technology to try to further their performance. And that includes getting the most out of their recovery and just knowing where they're at, knowing and understanding how they're reacting to training and what their bodies are doing. So I try to dip into that as much as possible, but the thing with technology is you have to understand the data you're collecting for it to actually be useful, because there's so many things out there. I mean, I think heart rate variability has been a really exciting topic in endurance sport, and tracking that to see how you're recovering and things like that. And that's something I've been paying more attention to. But there's so many things out there. You just have to understand what you're working with and how the data can help you and what changes you do need to make. And then specific to this panel, I have been using the Abbott's Libre Sense and the Super Sapiens app to track my glucose. And that has been really eye-opening. Speaking of needing to know what you're looking at, I've learned a lot about glucose and body. And like Chris said, everyone's bodies are so different. So I've really enjoyed the process of seeing how my body reacts to stress, sleep or lack thereof, different fueling strategies. And I captured a video of the Super Sapiens app, some data from November. And I'm going to explain the video quickly, and then we'll look at it. It's just a short clip of the app. But I captured my night of sleep. I was training for an Ironman at this time. And one thing that I've really learned using Super Sapiens is how important recovery is. Well, I knew it was important, but how important glucose levels were to my muscles' recovery. Because if your glucose levels drop below a certain point, then your muscles aren't getting what they need to properly recover. And during some of my bigger Ironman blocks, this is my sleep you can see right here. I nailed it this night, 100% recovery zone, nailed it. But in some of my other Ironman blocks, I did not nail it, and I was dropping way below the recovery zone, which cued to me that I needed to be fueling better during the day, more carbohydrates, more fuel in general. And then what you're looking at now is a 5-hour bike ride, which I'm sure to all of you sounds totally insane, but is totally basic in my world. And you can see the glucose score is not great on this one. I'm in the performance zone about 50% of the time, but this was an easier ride for me. And what I found fascinating, I don't know if you saw all those peaks and valleys, and those aligned perfectly for, when I started the ride and then when I was going up harder climbs, because I live in a mountainous area. I live in Salt Lake City. And so I was doing a lot of climbing, and each peak coordinated with a climb. And so just seeing how the effects of pushing harder and how that activates glucose in your blood. And actually one of those peaks I think was a bakery stop as well. So very crucial.
Yes.
Crucial to riding 5 hours.
The really cool thing about continuous glucose monitoring is, at least in practice, right, we used to have snapshots. We used to have what level of fuel were you at before you started and when you finished, right? Sometimes a lab setting you would have more, but we'd have one moment in time.
Yeah.
And now we can see, you rode a mountain and that's what it looked like, but also I felt terrible here, and what did that look like on my screen, right?
Yeah, totally. It's a huge feedback tool for me, right? There's a lot of reasons why an athlete could feel horrible, but if you can look at all your data and the live feedback, then sometimes you can pinpoint it. Okay, I feel terrible because I didn't eat enough, simply put.
Right.
And that's a pretty easy fix.
And it's nice to know sometimes it's not like, oh, your fitness is terrible. No, you just forgot to eat.
Yes.
So it's not you, it's the banana or whatever. Yeah. But that's a pretty cool look. Kevin, when you think through technology and you think through athletes that you're working with and that you're, friends with, what's the reception from athletes on technology? Is it, welcoming? Is it skepticism? Where's where are most people at?
Yeah, well, I missed that first quarter. So I'm Kevin Pierce. I'm a former professional snowboarder, and being an athlete, we're skeptical. I don't know about you guys in this room, but athletes are very skeptical about new and different in this technology coming out. And so there's kind of like both sides to it, where it's like super exciting, like all these advancements being made with the helmets and the new abilities that we have to do more flips and more spins. It's like, that's so awesome. But at the same time, it's like, we want to do it how we want to do it. And it's like, don't mess with how we do our stuff. So bringing new stuff into the game is definitely tough in any sport that you have. And I think that, all sports, it's so cool, especially in action sports, to see the progression. And how much bigger and better things are getting, but at the same time, it's scary. And I understand firsthand how scary it can be, but I think when you do the right thing and you put yourself in the right position, that us athletes can really do anything.
I agree. Our athletes, do you think more of them are those early adopters and willing to try things first, or they're more of a wait and see?
Yeah, well, I think that, the really progressive ones, really the ones doing the most and the best are the early adopters, and they are the ones that are taking on the new technologies and advancing it and pushing it to the boundaries. And then there are those ones that are kind of, no, I don't want to do the new stuff, and they're kind of more in the background and doing it their way. But I think you see these guys like, the best in the world, they're doing the new stuff. They're wearing the new stuff, and I think that's what's allowing them to push the limits and ultimately do what they do.
Sky, when I think of all the tools that endurance athletes have now to push their performance forward, the sky's the limit, but does that also give you like a mental edge, or is it feel, does the data, do you know a secret that other athletes don't know?
Well, I think it's like what I said earlier. You have to know how to use the data. And another side of all the data, while this technology is amazing, there is so much value in knowing your body and trusting your body and knowing how it feels. But that is how the data can help you know your body better. So yes, I do think it can give you an edge, or give me an edge, any athlete an edge. But knowing how to use it, but not dismissing just your own gut feelings and your own intuition on when your body's talking to you. Yeah, perfect.
And for amateur athletes, it's really relevant too, because I'm an amateur runner. But I remember my first marathon, and my wife is a runner also.
Dude's an amateur runner. He's done 27 marathons.
Well, not at her pace,
Yeah.
but she never uses her watch. She follows her body. She's amazing, and she actually listens to her body. When I try to do that, it doesn't end well, because when you listen to your body, you're listening to it. And for me, at least my first marathon, I didn't know how to fuel. I didn't know where my glucose level was. I didn't know how much lactic acid was building up in my muscles. So I had no measure. And so when you listen to your body telling you when all the bad things are setting in, it's too late. Yeah. Like my body was basically telling me, what the hell are you doing? Yeah. Why are you running 26.2 miles at your age? And you get the muscle cramps, you get the spasms, and you bonk out. The term bonking is when you run out of fuel. Imagine riding, like I said before, driving a car and you don't have a fuel gauge. Do you drive your car and you go by feel? Well, I think I've got this much gas left.
Yeah.
You can't. And so I think it's important, even for amateur athletes, to have that information in real time so you can correct it and kind of control your body during the race, not just wait till it's too late.
Right.
Because then it's too late to really refuel and get your electrolytes back to where they need to be. So I think that's another important thing to keep in mind.
Yeah, I always say that in a marathon, when you start feeling good is when you should start fueling. Because when you listen to your body and it tells you, why are you out here, that you went too long, right?
You probably know your body better now, right?
Now I do,
Yes.
but I didn't know going into this, and a lot of amateurs, only
Yes.
1% of the population runs a marathon in their lifetime.
Yeah.
And even that 1%, like you read what you can, you read books, but you never know, like how often do I need to do GU? How often do I stop and drink Gatorade? And everybody's body is different though. So I've learned over the years how often I need to refuel with the GU. I use the gel is what I use. And I drink plenty of water, I know now, but it took me some time to figure that out because I didn't have this technology available to tell my body, you need to rehydrate, you need to refuel. And I was waiting until it was too late, and I was bonking out at mile 20 or mile 21, or getting muscle cramps and muscle spasms.
Yep. Chris, you've got in Boston, you've got diverse athletes, diverse skill sets, diverse conditions, right? My favorite, you could have multiple PhDs in nutrition, and the question everyone asks you on race day is, so what's the weather going to be like? And how much do I hydrate? And how much sodium, right? So how are you guys working with technology and helping athletes kind of listen to their body, and really keep moving forward?
Well, before I answer that question, understand when you don't listen to your body, that means you're seeing me at the end of the race. And that's something you do not want to do if you can help it. So as far as weather goes, and you're right, Boston has an extreme of weather that is just hard to explain. The old adage, wait 2 minutes, it will change, is absolutely true. It's amazing because I'm watching the weather outside the stadium. It's changed at least 3 times. And that's what Boston weather is like. And we've been doing it for so long that, look, we can, as you know, weather is difficult to forecast. And also it's difficult for us to plan. We have to plan for what could be a hot day in 2012. I think we were almost 88, 90 degrees on the course. And we had a casualty rate of 8 or 9% that day. Fast forward to 2018, windstorm, 50-degree temperatures, 50-degree winds, absolutely frigid cold. And you look at the encounters, they were almost the exact same as it was in 2012 we had the heat. So we had basically either hypothermia or exertional heat stroke. And again, the number of encounters were very high both days. So we have to prepare for that and understand that what we hope will happen sometimes doesn't happen, and we've got to be ready. So again, as I've said earlier, the big thing for us is education. We need to make sure you as runners understand what do you need to do in those extremes. I go back to my Boston runners that are participating, getting ready as they are now for April. They're doing it in cold, rain, wind, snow. So even if we have a 65, 70-degree day in Boston, April 17th, that's hot for them. So they're not acclimatized. Conversely, my pro athletes that are training in great conditions, God knows where, and now all of a sudden it's 45, 50 degrees with massive wind chills, they drop out and struggle. So again, you've got to be prepared for either one of those. I think that the biggest thing that we struggle with, let me ask a question out of the group, maybe a quick raise of hands. How many people are runners in the audience, have run races? I would be curious, we could talk about this later when we do the fifth quarter, whatever it is, that how do you really know what your fluid prescription is? How much do you need to drink based on the distance, your exertional effort during the race itself, and weather conditions? And what we find in our industry is that fluid prescription is different for everybody. So how do we approach that? And again, if we can get you to understand that, how to determine that and what to do, then we're going to have fewer problems in those medical tents. So, we had a fatality in 2001, Cynthia Lucero, a 24-year-old charity runner that died of exertional hyponatremia at mile 22 for drinking sports drinks. It wasn't water, it was sports drinks. And, we realized then that we had a problem, and we need to do a lot of education, not only to our runners, but our healthcare providers about what exertional hyponatremia was and how to deal with it. So what we're now doing, and this happened pretty much the year after that fatality, we brought in Abbott. We started to use their Abbott point-of-care iStat device for us to know what your blood sodium levels are. So if you came in the tent and we determined that you needed fluids, whether it be oral or IV, we knew what your blood sodium level was. Because let's face it, if your blood sodium levels are so low, if I give you a normal saline bag of IV, that's going to be detrimental to your health and may even kill you. So again, having that information is absolutely vital. And that's where, products that Abbott provides us every year. And again, understand they're not only at the finish line medical tents, they're on our course medical tents too. So again, that technology and that ability to determine things is important for us.
And that's helpful because sometimes we think technology is for the elites and the fastest people in the room, but in Boston, it's the whole field, and it's you're front of the pack and you're back of the pack, and a lot of the technologies that we're talking about today, yes, absolutely, there's a trickle down effect, and there's from the elite, but it really is for all comers that can benefit from this technology. But taking a step back, thinking through our halftime speaker, we are going to talk to the very high level of the elite, the fastest man in the world as far as the world marathons go. So I'd like to introduce our speaker, Eliud Kipchoge, who couldn't be here today because he's training in one of those fantastic climates, getting ready for some spring marathons, and we can go ahead and roll that video.
I think for all the endurance sports, this approach to understanding of energy systems, this gives you a baseline on what parameters to consider.
LibraSense actually is a small sensor whereby you need to actually fix into your arm. The data actually is transferred from the LibraSense itself to my phone. You don't need to carry your phone all the time when you have a LibraSense. what drives the body of a human being is the food, and glucose actually is purely food. So if you have very low glucose, then you can't perform. It's the only way to maintain your energy, your focus, and even what to actually maintain your mental strength.
The way the gadget works is that it gives you all the possibilities. When you're sleeping, when you've taken a meal, when you are training, it will help us to now, this athlete needs to have A, B, C, D taken care of as far as energy is concerned.
This whole experience is a big motivation because we feel that not now already, but that benefits are coming in the future. First of all for Elliot, but that it will open the door for others as well, because we are going to do learnings that others who are coming behind Elliot are also going to benefit from. The way we are all feeling that if we communicate well and we analyze well, that we can change some small things, that we think that those small things can have a huge impact.
It has helped me already, I have the knowledge, but I need to help others to spread the word about LibraSense. I hope it will spread to the whole world, be it east, west, north or south.
This is another seriously strong performance from Eliud Kipchoge. The arm raised aloft, Eliud Kipchoge wins.
In sport, you need to enjoy what you are doing, so it's the future.
Kipchoge has, if you ever get a chance to speak with him, he will explain to you how knowing what's going on behind the scenes has been a real game changer for him. And what he's learned over time is knowing his glucose levels, knowing his energy levels, has helped him fine-tune that energy delivery that you talked about, kind of like, when do I need to fuel exactly? And when we're talking about seconds and breaking a 2-hour barrier, if you could skip one gel or one chew that you're taking and not, stop for that one fuel break, you can break world records. So Eliud has the world record for the marathon. It's 2:01:09, which is mind-boggling. And a great thing that you'll see is across the Abbott World Marathon Majors, which is a series of very high-level marathons. So it's Chicago, it's New York, it's Boston, it's London, it's Tokyo, Berlin. We often bring a treadmill to the expo that is set at that world record pace that Kipchoge runs. And you'll have all comers come to the expos to jump on this, this treadmill and try the pace, to maintain Kipchoge's pace. And usually they sometimes fly off the back within 15 seconds. But it's always that thought of, how does he maintain that for 2 hours? So he maintains it because he knows what's going on behind the scenes and how to fuel appropriately and how to use technology. And that technology can also help us protect our athletes, right? You talked a little bit about using that glucose sensor to prevent kind of that going low and knowing that your muscles are recovering. But there's other ways we can protect athletes too and help them achieve health as well as performance. So Kevin, this question is for you. When you think through protecting athletes, tell us a little bit about your story. Tell us a little bit about where you were at as an athlete, your head injury, and then let's talk about the mental fortitude of athletes and that perception of being tough and never quitting, and how technology can help us kind of navigate some of that.
Yeah, so I was kind of like at the top of competitive snowboarding. I was like one of the very best, and when you're in that level and in that place, kind of like all of us athletes, it's just go, 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 and like you're not really thinking about all the other stuff going on. You're just doing what you have to do. And I was in a really special place there in 2009, training for those Winter Olympics, and I was just kind of full board, all go to make that Olympic team. And I got a concussion at the first Olympic qualifier. And this kind of is unknown about me because I hit it. And that's one thing that you can do with a concussion is you can hide it. You don't always have to, unlike a broken bone or anything else you injured, you don't always have to let people know when you hit your head. And I was able to hide that concussion and kind of just wipe it off. Nothing happened and the symptoms weren't too bad and I felt fine. And then it was a week and a half later that I ultimately had the crash that immediately ended my snowboard career forever and completely ended my Olympic dreams and in my hope to making it to where I ultimately wanted to be. And so I think that, as great as any of us think that we are, we're not above the injury, and especially a head injury because of how serious they are and, how career-ending they can be. And so for me, I guess I learned that firsthand is that, we're not maybe as badass as we think we are. And, I thought I was the best, and, you can't always win that, so.
Thinking through the data points that we have now on brain injury, and I'll ask you, Chris, but I'm curious if you had that data in hand at that moment where you had that first crash, or that suggested this is a serious injury, how do you think you would have done things differently?
Yeah, for sure. If I had gotten information and I was grown up enough and I was acting like an adult and I did what I needed to do, and I wasn't an adult at the time, I was a kid, so I did kid things and I didn't let people know. And if I had gone diagnosed and I had taken my time off, I know my career would have gone in a totally different direction, and I know that I wouldn't have had the career-ending injury if I listened and I did what I needed to do after the first concussion. But as an athlete, I'm sure so many of you can relate to this. When you're, whether it's athlete or whatever you're doing, when you're in something and you're all in something, it's hard to have somebody tell you that you have to stop and that you have to sit on the sidelines. And I'd have to go ahead and say that's one of the hardest things in the world, is to stop doing what you love, especially when you have an injury it's not visible, that somebody can't see that. Why is Kevin out? Kevin's fine. He's walking around, and it's so I think that's really what's been hardest for me. And even these last 10 years living with this head injury, it's people don't understand why I do the things I do at certain times or why I'm acting in certain ways. And it's because this thing's not allowing any of you to see how broken it really was and how badly I really was hurt. So the brain's a tough one, man. The brain really, there's so many beautiful people in this room, and it's how many of us are dealing with something? It's I don't need to raise a hand because I know it's the majority of us have dealt with something, and it's kind of how do you figure out your way through that? And I don't know, we all do the best we can.
To mitigate the invisible injuries, as you're talking about now. Chris, when you think through these invisible injuries and we think through the technology and the data we have, what do we have, what tools do we have right now to help diagnose, to help mitigate risk? And alternatively, if we didn't have those tools, what would we have to do?
So, it has come a long way, and Kevin's story is really an amazing one. He was unfortunately one of the smaller categories of people that had a concussion. There's different grades of concussion in medicine. We have mild, moderate, and severe, and it's somewhat crudely defined how we define each of those categories. But he was one of the victims that had a severe concussion. He had a severe TBI, traumatic brain injury, was in the hospital for quite a while. But the majority of the concussions we see are actually mild. They're the ones that even non-athletes will have. In fact, the highest profile concussions we see are the ones in sports, right? And football and soccer and rugby. But the majority of the concussions are actually lay people that are just going about their day. And 95% of the concussions we see are in that mild category. He was in the more moderate to severe category. And up until now, we've had neurologic tests. When somebody comes to the emergency department, we get a history. If it's an athlete, they'll lie to me. You ask them, how are you feeling? Do you have a headache? Are you dizzy? No, I'm fine. Because they want to get back in the game. They don't want to be sidelined, because that's very true. I see that. So it's tough because they don't tell you the truth. They want to minimize their symptoms. So you have as much of a history as you can obtain. You get the exam, you look for certain signs on your physical exams, neurologic tests we do. And we have CAT scans. And over the years, that's been thought of as the gold standard, but it's not. In fact, we scan a lot of people we see that come into the ER with brain injury. In fact, many times we scan people too much. And a lot of people don't really need a CAT scan. And that's where the technology is changing now. I'm sure you had a CAT scan. And the CAT scans, for those that aren't aware, are really there to look for not a concussion, but to look for other complications of the brain injury, like hemorrhage in the brain or bleeding or a skull fracture. 90% of the time when we CAT scan people that come to the emergency room with a brain injury, the CAT scan's normal. And the patients will ask me, so does that mean I'm fine? I didn't have a concussion, I can go back to school, go back to work, go back to sports? And they can't, because most of the time they probably did have a concussion, they just didn't have a skull fracture or brain hemorrhage. So up until now, other than neuro exams, and there's other neurocognitive testing we do, there's a lot of emerging technologies now looking at eye tracking movements and EEG and things like that. But we actually have something exciting in Abbott, and I'm really excited because I work for Abbott now, but as a clinician, I think it's really groundbreaking. And it's the first biomarker available in a rapid portable test with a couple drops of plasma. Within minutes, it takes about 15 minutes to get a result. You actually can detect a brain injury. You can see that invisible injury, right? When they come in with a sprained ankle, their ankle's swollen, I get an x-ray, right? But you don't see what's going on under the skull. People have headaches, they have nausea, they have dizziness. And many patients continue having symptoms. Over half of them will have symptoms a year later. 17% of people with concussions actually are unemployed a year after their brain injury, even a mild one. So it's important for us to have a marker. We've had this in medicine for a long time. We have a biomarker for the heart when there's a heart injury and a heart attack and damage to the heart muscle. We have another marker called creatinine that we measure to look at kidney injury. But up until now, we've never had a biomarker in the blood that we can measure to detect that brain injury. And I think that's what's changing, is being able to use that to not only rule out a significant brain injury, so I don't have to order an unnecessary CAT scan, which involves a certain amount of cost and delay and radiation, but also when those markers are elevated, it does raise red flags, and it helps guide clinicians, whether it be me in the ER or whether it be somebody in the medical tent at another type of event, or in sports. It allows healthcare providers and trainers to have some more objective data to guide their decision about whether they need follow-up and how they should go about their treatment. So I think that's the biggest groundbreaking breakthrough now, is the development is these biomarkers that we have at Abbott.
That's awesome. And they're like, just in time kind of biomarkers to help diagnose and obviously mitigate that risk. Chris, when you think through the athletes that you're working with, and you work with a variety, right? You work with not only Boston, but other very high-level athletes. And we think through invisible injuries. What kind of data do you wish you had access to, right? Because kind of like when your patients, Chris, come into the ER, you have a conversation with them, hopefully, and you get more background. But sometimes when you're seeing athletes at Boston, it's just, there's no conversation, it's just a data point. So what kind of technologies are you utilizing, and what do you wish you had?
Well, again, we see people that we have no medical history on.
Right.
And that's a major concern for us, people that can be coming in semi-conscious, unconscious, or have a different language set that we just don't understand. So we're, in some cases, clinically, you might be able to pull that data up through a system. We don't have that right now. But in Boston, we're working on that. We were one of the first marathons last April to not make it mandatory, but request that our athletes provide at least a subset of 10 medical questions and answers to give us a baseline of where they're coming from. Do they have a history of cardiac arrest in the family? Are they diabetic? Are they anaphylactic? Whatever it may be, did they have exertional heat stroke in the past? To give us something to work on once they came in that tent. Now, I haven't convinced the BA to make it mandatory, but for the first time that we did it, we had about 20% of 30,000 that did apply. So we're hoping to continue that, but having that data is absolutely vital for us in the medical tent. If I could pivot a little bit, we were talking about technology in protecting athletes. I think one of the major advances that we've seen in the last 20 or so years is the advent of the AED and that ability to have that on the sidelines. And obviously, I'm sure most of you witnessed what took place last Monday night and that response, which was absolutely phenomenal. But let's face it, that's not the case in other sporting events. That's the highest you can get with what you saw, with what an NFL team can do. But when you're looking at high school athletes, whether it be soccer, football, whatever it may be, you know, you can have all the technology in the world that you want, but if you don't have the right people there to administer it and care for that athlete, that to me is the bigger problem. So from the medical side of things, I'm what they call a certified athletic trainer. So I'm the guy on the sidelines that's been taking care of college athletes, youth sports for years if something happens. And as parents of whether it be your own kids or someone that you know, or if you're coaches, do you really want the responsibility of what's going to happen to that athlete if there's no medical person like me or Chris or others there to administer the proper care? So I kind of implore you to go back to your communities and talk to your administrators, your leagues, your coaches, to find out why are they not employing an athletic trainer on the sidelines? I mean, how valuable is your son or your daughter or your loved one on the field? Again, you're not going to get that outcome that you saw Monday night. So to be able to have someone that knows what to do with the technology and how to deal with things. And then, as you indicated, sometimes be the person or the voice of reason. Because let's face it, the pressure on these athletes, youth athletes, from either it be the parent, the coach, or even the athlete themselves, is going to be one of those things they're going to try to get through the injury and kind of get by it. And that's something that you can't always do.
That's very helpful. And thinking through how we're protecting athletes, that's something that always comes to my mind as a parent, right? Like where is our technology and where's our health at now, and where do we want it to be for our future athletes and, you know, our current ones as well. And thinking through that, moving to that fourth quarter, the future of our industry, right? We talk again about this ecosystem of getting our communities on board, getting the technology, you know, decentralizing it so that we all have access to it. But when we think through the future of health technology in sports, I would love to hear from all the panel, like, where would you want that technology to go? Let's start with what's on your wish list. Chris, you know, you had talked about, you know, a hydration monitor. As a dietitian, I want that too, so I can be like, no, really, right. Put down the salt tabs. We're okay without them, right?
Yeah.
But what's on your wish list?
Well, I mean, it's the first time I've ever been to the CES, and I was at the exhibits and the show, and it's just amazing the technology that all of you folks were involved with. And, you know, as I referenced during the first quarter, one of the problems we have is, what's your hydration status? What do you need? So I'll put the challenge out to the folks, the scientists and the technology geeks in the room. Can we develop a good app that will deal with the individuality of what you need for hydration and how to deal with that? There's got to be a way to do that. I'm just not smart enough to know what it is, but if I had my druthers and what I'd like to see, that's top of the list right there, because that will help not only running athletes, but athletes across the board.
That's awesome. Chris Devlantes, thinking through the future of health, I would love to hear where you think technology is going, but also speak a little bit. Abbott's got an amazing relationship with Real Madrid, which is my favorite football club, not football, but football club on the globe. And thinking through the future of health technology there and how we're advancing performance and how is that all going, and what is your wish list with that club?
It's been a great relationship with Real Madrid, and they're looking at a lot of different things with regard to nutrition and athletes and sports and the soccer team and the youth, or football team, the real football in other countries. But they're looking at also the biomarkers for their brain injuries, because a lot of soccer players do suffer those, and collaborating, and they're doing a lot of research. So I think taking that data, and that's what I'm excited about with Abbott, is they're kind of harnessing some of this data and some of this research and some of this technology to digitize it, to decentralize it. So you're taking the lab and you're taking some of this information that years ago we would only get when they would arrive at the hospital after a complication happened, but digitizing it and democratizing it and making it available to all players of all levels. I think that's my wish list. Is my future vision would be that we have this technology available, and teams like Real Madrid are paving the way. They're setting the pace. They're exploring all these different applications and how nutrition is a big player, and how monitoring all these things at all ages, because they do a lot with the youth. But to be able to take this, and whether it be biowearables to measure lactate, ketones, and glucose, to be able to optimize your diet and your nutrition, your training, your recovery. And when it comes to handheld analyzers, like Chris mentioned, to be able to have an objective idea of what's going on with their electrolytes. And when somebody presents to me in the emergency department, to have that information of every field, every arena, every stadium, every school, every ambulance, every urgent care, every doctor's office, every emergency department, to have this technology to help us to deliver care and the right treatment at the right time for the right patient, whether it be an athlete that's a professional athlete or an amateur weekend warrior, doing their first half marathon. So I think that's my vision, is bringing this technology to the forefront, making it accessible for everyone of all ages, man or woman, young or old, amateur or professional.
Yep, I think that's good. It's you hit on something really important. It's this technology that we do want for our athletes, but we want for everybody, because everyone, whether they're a wellness seeker or a weekend warrior, we're all kind of athletes at heart, and we all have health on the mind. Sky, when you think through technology and you think through wish list, what is on yours?
Well, I have to say, I think Chris's wish list is brilliant, because I could certainly use that in my competitions when I'm out there all day. But I think, as an elite athlete, I'm up against all my competitors, and winning is what counts when you're a professional triathlete. It's win or lose. And so I think what I would love is just some magical thing to tell me, yes, that session was effective. Yes, you've adapted to that. Yes, you nailed your fueling. Just some indication to know how my body has immediately reacted to whatever I just did to it in the training session, or whether I ended too dehydrated and I needed to hydrate better. It's pretty broad. I think there's small tools for all of these things, and so we're getting there if you have all of these different technologies in your toolbox, but maybe condensing all of that. And then I think too, as a professional, all of the technology, there's so much out there. We have VO2 max testing, we have lactate testing, we have glucose monitors, we have heart rate monitors, all these different monitors and things, but just maybe simplifying the education on it so that I can understand as an athlete what I'm actually seeing. I'm not educated in sports science, and a lot of what I have to do is just some quick Googling and see what I'm looking at. So I think bridging the gap between even the technologies and then the knowledge and how to use it and education is a key part of that.
No, it's a good point. I always think we have all these technologies, and it's a so what? So how do we overlay all those, like your heart rate and your glucose on one dashboard, right? But also like, tell me what that means.
Yes.
And then also kind of what you said, like we are accumulating more data. What's optimal look like, right? What does optimal look like for me, for you, and helping athletes understand that as well. What's on your wish list, Kevin?
I guess I'm a little different, because I'm sitting here in the middle as a pro snowboarder, and it's like got runners and Ironmans and all these so I'm like the crazy guy, right? Snowboarding's now being 10 years out of it, looking back, it's action sports are crazy, and yet I love action sports. That's where my heart lays. So it's now being a father and being totally not a professional snowboarder anymore, it's how can we make these sports safer so the athletes can continue to do what they're going to do and continue to progress the sports? Because I can tell you this very surely, snowboarding's not slowing down. Snowboarding's not moving backwards. They're not doing less corks on the jumps. They're not doing less spins in the half pipes. I was trying a trick called a cab double cork where I got so severely injured. Now they're doing triple corks in the half pipe. Now they're doing quad corks on the jump. So it's instead of thinking about no, less corks, don't do that. It's how can we make these safer for the athletes? Because it's gonna keep progressing and it's gonna keep moving forward. So how can we make the helmet safer? The helmets aren't that safe. The helmets are good and they're coming out with new technologies, but the helmets could be better. How can we make these helmets so you don't get a career-ending brain injury after you hit your head? What can we do to allow the sports to be safer? And I sit here and I don't have that answer. I don't know what it is that you can do. I know that, these athletes are good at what they do, and it's not that often, but it is happening. So it's putting something in place so that doesn't happen, I guess, would be my ultimate dream.
And I think it's okay that we don't have the answers, because I'm sure someone out here with all the expertise and all the technology does have the answer and can move that forward. So kind of last remarks on what you, closing up this panel before we move to overtime or extra time, if you're football like I'm football, what are your lasting thoughts that you want to share? Chris, I'll let you go first. Or like I've said it all. I've got every point down.
I think the latest thing to what Kevin said is just raising awareness, because especially with brain injury, I think that's where I'm most excited about the developments, and raising awareness of the public, of amateur athletes, and clinicians like myself, to be aware that these biomarkers exist, because most of the colleagues of mine in emergency medicine aren't even aware that these biomarkers have been developed and are available now with this Abbott iStat alinity test, to be able to measure that and have a measurable, objective way of, and to add, in addition to what we're doing now, we have decision-making rules, we have ways we assess players and amateurs that come in, or even, like I said, the lay public, because most concussions don't happen in athletes. It's mechanical falls, slipping on the ice, or the people tailgating in the parking lot waiting to come in and watch the football game. But being able to have something objective to be able to assess them more accurately and give them, because there's been a lot of ambiguity about who needs follow-up, what is the follow-up, and where do we go? And I think that's where we're heading. That's where the research is going, is to be able to use these tests in the future to be able to prognosticate, to be able to predict how risky is it, how much at risk are they at having persistent post-concussion symptoms that could last for years. I'm sure Kevin can attest to that. So being able to objectively tell patients when they leave the ER that, you know, your head's okay for now, you didn't have a bleed, but you need follow-up, and that's what's exciting to me.
And it's helpful if you can more definitively say, you can get back in the game, or let's not yet get back in the game. I think that's what athletes and what patients want, whatever their game might be.
Yeah, and once that technology, and it's still in development, is available to be at the sideline, because right now there's some things keeping it from being able to be done right instantly at the sideline, but being able to have that information available at your fingertips within minutes. Eventually, someday we'll be able to use that, and among other things, to determine if it's okay to go back, because it's competitive like yours. It's consecutive, repetitive trauma. It wasn't your first injury; it was the second injury that really did you in. That happened a week later.
I am kind of interested to see in 15 years, 10 years, what does that sideline cart look like, right? Is it an iStat, an AED? Like, what is that going to look like for athletes? So, Sky, what do you?
I guess my overarching feeling after listening to this and engaging in this panel is just how important health is to all of us as humans. I mean, health is the ultimate goal in life, right? Without it, life isn't a lot of fun or comfortable or anything. And whether you're a pro athlete or not an athlete at all, it just dictates so much of your life. And so I feel like these technologies help us all live a healthier, better life. And for athletes who are maybe putting themselves at risk, or I don't want to just destroy my body by the end of my career. I want to live a long, healthy, happy life. And I believe that technologies can help all of us do that in understanding our bodies.
That's awesome. Yep. Kind of know what's going on behind that curtain. Yeah, that's amazing. Kevin?
I guess what comes up to me is hope. Is that I hope that you guys can, whether it's you, whether it's a loved one, whether it's a friend, a family member that gets injured, that you can give them hope, and to know that you see me sitting here with a very severe traumatic brain injury, and I'm not doing as well as I am because I rolled over and I woke up one day and I was all better. It's been the last decade of working my ass off every single day, all day, to get here and to be in this place, is because I never gave up, and I had the hope that I'd get my life back.
That is hard to follow.
I'm going to follow it.
Okay.
Because the three panelists really kind of gave their vision. But I think, and I'm going to say something personally, Kevin and I first met for the first time last night, and his story is absolutely phenomenal. And I admire all of the panelists, but Kevin, the fact that you were taken from your sport, from a tragic injury, and then obviously dealing with this brain injury and didn't go hide. you use this other platform to educate and help other people. That is just so outstanding. And I just want to give you a round of applause for just taking that approach.
That's awesome.
And to your point, that's what we're all trying to do is help each other. Yeah, buddy, I appreciate it, sorry. But, you know, we're flying out together too, so it's a good thing. But anyways, it's just to have the people like on this panel and all of you in this room to work together to make our sports and our lives safer. You know, that's what we want to do. I'll go back if I could. I know I probably shouldn't do this, but going back to the app that I'm looking for someone in this room to devise. If you do devise it, trust me, I'll tell you, we'll test it at the Boston Marathon, and we'll also give you a grant to make it happen. So I'll put the gauntlet in front of you. That's what we need. That's what I think our industry needs and our sports needs, is that hydration app. But again, this has been an outstanding afternoon, so I can't thank you all enough for allowing me to take part with these outstanding folks.
Thank you. Thank you. With that, we will wrap up our discussion. I think we've established that health deserves to be, you know, forefront of sports technology. And it's incredible to hear really what we've accomplished so far and what we are sure to accomplish, you know, moving forward. So I want to thank all the panelists. I want to thank you for sharing your stories and your insights and your advice and what you wish for, what you hope for. And I want to thank all of you for attending and for your engagement. As we wrap up, please stay for our overtime networking opportunity. You'll be able to look at the Abbott iStat. You'll be able to look at our bio wearables, talk Libre Sense, and the amazing way of pulling back the curtain and finally understanding what your body is saying to you as you're training and as you're going about your daily lives. And again, thank you for coming. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for moderating. And we had no timeouts.
No timeouts, no flags, nothing. Yes.